Alright guys, so this is Salesforce Assignment 6. What we're going to be doing in this assignment is using the Google Geocoding XML API and Salesforce XML parsing methods in order to have a HTTP response as well as a latitude and a longitude returned based on the city and the state that the user passes in. Now, in order to do this, the first thing that we need to do is learn about the Geocoding API, and we need to be able to generate a Geocoding API key. All right, guys, so in order to get a Geocoding API key, what you want to do first is go to Google and then type this in, Google Geocoding API, which is right here. You're going to press enter. And then from there, you want to click on the first link that shows up, Get Started Geocoding API. Now, this Geocoding API is basically, what you see here is actually the Get Started page. This Get Started page actually tells you all about geocoding, and it pretty much gives you an overview of the Geocoding API. It's very in-depth if you were to go through this page. But what we want to do now is actually go and get this API key. So we want to get API key. And up here it says to get an API key, perform the following steps. So you can either get one from here by getting an API key from the Google Cloud Platform console, or you can just scroll down a bit and you can follow these steps. This is a detailed guide for users of the standard Geocoding API. And from there, you just follow these steps, and then once you complete these, you'll have your Geocoding API key, which is what you need in order to do this particular Salesforce assignment. And that's pretty much it. Now, for this particular application, this is what it's going to look like. So first of all, as you see here, we're basically just going to have a form here where the user can enter in a city and a state, and then once they press the submit button, they will get an HTTP response as well as a latitude and a longitude. So the HTTP response that we get is going to be retrieved from that Google's Geocoding API. We would have to manipulate the request in such a way so that the user's input is passed to that Geocoding API through a GET request. So hopefully you guys understand what's going on here and how to actually do it, but this is what we're going to be doing in this particular video. And as you can see here, this is just an example of what should be returned. We're going to enter in a city. For example, let's say Atlanta, then we have a state, Georgia, and then as you can see here, we get an XML HTTP response returned as well as a latitude and longitude. So without further ado, let's jump right into the code. Alright guys, so what I'm going to be doing in this portion of the video is the actual coding portion. So as you already know, we're going to be using Google's Geocoding XML API and Salesforce XML parsing methods in order to have an HTTP response, latitude, and a longitude returned based on the city and the state that a user enters into our application. So I've already created my Apex class, and I've already created a visual force page for this particular assignment. And in my Apex class, I already have some code that I've added here. And what I'm going to do now is basically just go through it and explain the development of this. So first of all, let's zoom in. Okay. So the first thing that we have here is our class, Apex class. I named the class Salesforce Assignment 6. We then have some data members here. We have 5 data members. We have a city, We have a state, HTTP response body, as well as the longitude and the latitude. All these data members are going to be used in order to get the job done when we go through developing this application. So the first thing that we need to do is create this method. This method is called get HTTP response. And the method is basically going to be used for returning an HTTP response based on the city and the state that is passed into this method. And before we actually jump into the code, I just wanted to add this for reference to basically show how to manipulate the format of the response body. So as I said before, we're using the Google's Geocoding API, and there is a URL, a GET request URL that you can hit in order to get the HTTP response. So hopefully you guys have gone through the Geocoding XML, the Google's Geocoding XML documentation. It explains how to do this, but basically we would just hit this URL in order to get a JSON response. But in this video, we're going to be getting an XML response. So basically we would go https maps.googleapis.com maps API geocoding XML. This is going to determine the format of the response that we want to be returned. And for JSON up here, you can see that we have to put JSON up here to get a JSON response. But as I said, we're going to be using XML. After that, we're going to enter in the address. And basically, we're going to be entering in a state as well. And then from there, we have to add our API key. So I've showed you in a previous video how to go about creating your API key, and you would just put it here. But for this video, we're just going to be entering in a city and a state, and the URL is going to look something like this. We're going to have our XML, and then we're basically just going to add whatever our city is as well as whatever our state is. And then after that, our API key. All right, so let's start writing the code now. First of all, you need to create a HTTP response and an HTTP request object. So we would do something like this: HTTP request equals new HTTP request, and then we do one for HTTP response. And to just make this clear, I'm going to add a comment here. These two objects will be used to hold the request response. All right, so what we need to do next is send the request to the Geocoding API. And I believe I have it here. And this is how we're going to do it. I'm going to just add a comment really quick so that you guys understand what's going on. All right, so what we're doing here, we're going to send the request to the Geocoding API. So we want to take the request object, since this is the object that is going to be holding the request, and we're going to set an endpoint. And this endpoint is going to be maps googleapis.com maps API geocoding XML, since this is the type of response that we want back. We then are going to have our address, and then from there we're going to pass in the city, and we're going to pass in the state. And I've done it like this, where I would have to actually have the city and the state from up here passed in. So we would have to manipulate this string so that we'll be able to have these values passed in. And then after that, you would just want to enter in your API key. Okay. So the next thing that we need to do is to specify the type of call that we will make to this service. So that's what we're going to be doing next. And we just want to go request.set method, and then this is going to be a get. It's going to be a get because we don't have a body, and all the information that we want to pass to this request is included within this URL, as you can see in the city and state. So this is going to be a get. And after this, we need to create an object, HTTP, which is going to be used for sending the request. HTTP equals new HTTP. And then we just want to retrieve the response based on the request user has passed in. And basically the request that the user has passed in is the city and the state. We would just go res equals http.send res, well, req. That would be the request. So basically, this is our response, and we're setting our response, which we created up here, equal to the set request. And then from there, the only thing that we need to do is just return the response, because that's ultimately what we want to do in this method. We've named the method get HTTP response, and we just want to return that response down here. So this is the entire first method that we need to create. Now what we want to do is move on to our next method. And this is our next method. This method is going to get HTTP response body. So we're going to get the HTTP response body. It's going to return that as a string. All right. So let's jump right into this. All right. So the first thing that we need to do is basically add some conditionals to check if the city and state is not null or empty. So we're going to do something like this. If city not equal to null and equal to an empty string, and we want to do the same thing for state. Then we want something to happen. So in order for this application to work, the user needs to be able to enter in, or the user needs to enter in a city and a state. So we want to have a conditional around here that checks for that before they even, before the request is even sent. Now, what we're going to be doing inside of this conditional statement is this. We're going to go string my body equals get HTTP response. city state dot get body. I just want to add a comment up here, this conditional. Add, well, this conditional, I'm just going to say this checks if a city state is populated. And then this string right here is basically going to be the body, and basically this is what's going to be returned. So let's just keep this right here for now. And then we just want to go return my body. Enter in a city and state first. So basically, if the user does not enter in a city and state, we're going to get this returned, because a valid city and state has to be entered in order for this method to work. So in order to get a response body, we need to enter in valid information. And I wanted to explain this. So basically I have a string called my body, and I set this equal to get HTTP response, which takes in a city and a state. So it's actually calling the method that we just created up here, which takes in these two parameters. And from there, we'll be able to retrieve our body, because this is going to be the response. There's a method that we can call on this called get body, which is going to retrieve the body, pretty much, the HTTP response body. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys. All right, so the next thing that I want to do is process the latitude and the longitude. That's what we're going to be doing next. So we're going to go into our method here, and as you can see, I've already created a comment up here. This method will process the longitude or latitude of the address passed to the Google's Geocoding API. All right, let's jump right into this. So what I need first is to create a variable that holds the longitude and the latitude. Pretty long comment, but it explains exactly what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be creating a variable, and that variable is going to be string requested val. And I want to set this equal to an empty string. After I do that, I'm going to add another conditional statement, just like we did before. So I just need to take this, and then what we're going to be doing is getting the body of the HTTP response document. All right, so we're going to begin the body of the HTTP response document. And what we're doing here is we're using the dom.document doc, and we're setting this equal to get HTTP response body. And then we're passing in a city and a state. And from there, we're going to call a method called get body document. So this method here is basically going to allow us to make our way through the actual HTTP response body. It doesn't just simply display the body, but allows us to parse through it and make our way through different levels of this XML response body. So we'll have a way of making our way into each of the elements, as well as navigating through children of elements. All right, so the next thing that we need to do is to retrieve. We need to retrieve the root element for this document. A geocoding response. And that is the root element. And I kind of want to show you guys that. Give me 1 second. Alright guys, so this is what I actually wanted to show you. I said that we're going to be retrieving the root element for this document, which is Geocoding Response. As you can see up here, Geocoding Response, which is right here. And from there, we are going to make our way to we're going to make our way down into this and traverse through all the elements as well as the children in order to get the latitude and the longitude. So the first thing that we need to do is this. Okay, so we're going to be retrieving so the first thing that we need to do is use we need to use nested loops until we get to the element that we want. That's what we need to do. So well, first of all, for this particular comment here, to retrieve the root element for this document, geocoding response, first of all, we need to do this. dom.xml node root element equals doc.get root element. And this is going to do exactly what this comment here says. Basically retrieve the root element, just like I said. Now we want to use nested for loops until you get the element you want. All right, so we're just going to create our for loops. For dom.xml node xml node obj doc.get root element get child elements. For every node. All right, so basically, as I said before, we're going to be traversing through each one of these elements until we get the element that we want. All right, so I'm going to create another for loop and then go dom.xml node child xml node obj.get child elements. Get child elements, and we're going to need parentheses right here, then we're going to need another one. All right, so we're basically just making our way through these elements, and I want to show you, first I want to show you exactly which element we're trying to retrieve. So let me just make this easier to read. All right, so this is what we want. We want this. We want this latitude, and we want this longitude right here. So we start off at Geocode Response, and then then we're going to make our way here to result. And as you can see, result has, so result here, it has children, but we're trying to make our way into this geometry, location, and then lat and long. So that's pretty much what we're trying to get to. We're trying to get to this location element, and then we want to make our way down into this location element and retrieve the child, latitude and longitude. All right, so I'm just going to continue writing the code here. And let me zoom this in. Forgot to do that. Okay. Now, once we make it to the point in XML we're looking for, which is this. We're going to do this. We're gonna update the data members. That's what we're gonna do. So maybe I'll just explain this a little bit more. So once we get to that, we're going to do something like this. Lat and long. We want to update the lat and long data members. So basically what I'm saying here is once we make our way down to the element that we're trying to retrieve, we then want to grab that lat and long, and then we want to update our data members. So right under here, we're going to do this again for well, these cannot, the one thing I forgot, these cannot be the same, so I'm just going to name this node here, so we can kind of distinguish between these for loops here. All right. And this will go child.get child elements. All right, so let's move on to this part of the code now. Trying to actually figure out why. Give me 1 second. All right, so let's just continue. For dom.xml node child.get, well, XML node, yeah, dom.xml node child node to child node dot get child elements we want to then add inside of here an if conditional statement that is going to check the text. So we just want to go if. All right, so we just want to go if child node to dot get text equal to null, and child node to dot get name lat, and angular direction equals latitude. Then we want to do something. And to just explain this clear, what we've done, we've pretty much made our way down to the element that we actually want. And what we're doing is we're checking for the name of this node. We're looking for the lat node. So if the child node to dot get name and it equals lat, then and the angular direction equals lat. Angular direction, as I said before, is the parameter that is going to be passed into this particular method. Then we want to do something. So inside this conditional statement, we want to do something. So if we find the latitude element inside of the HTTP response, and also the angular direction passed into this method is latitude, and angular direction is this is what I'm talking about. If that's passed in, then we want to do something. And what we're going to do is set the data member that we created earlier. So we just want to do something like this. If is passed into, yeah, so basically if latitude is passed in the param of this method, return the value. Else, if, to make this easier to read, we're just going to go else if child node to dot get text and child node to dot get name lng and angular direction is longitude. Then we want to do something here. So we've already wrote the code for latitude. Now we're just doing it for longitude now. so hopefully this makes sense to you guys. I can also add this comment here, but I think it's pretty straightforward. And I'm going to make my way, and now I'm going to explain everything. Just give me a second here. All right. So let me just finish this off. Let me just finish this off. This method. All right. So we have the requested value here. All right, and then we just want to go return requested val. Oh, this is kind of a long video, but I just want to try to make sure that I explain this as clearly as possible for you guys. All right, so let's start off from the top to just make sure that you guys understand. Okay, so we have this method. This method will process the longitude and latitude of the address that's passed in. This method is going to take in an angular direction. The angular direction is either going to be the word longitude or the word latitude. Now, what we want to do when we first get into this method is create a variable that holds the longitude and latitude value based on the angular direction that is passed in. After that, we want to add ourselves a conditional statement that is going to check and see if the city and the state is populated. If the city and state is populated, then we want to move forward and pass the city and state to the Geocoding API. Okay, and we're doing that right here. We have a dom.document doc equals get HTTP response, which is going to have the city and the state pass into this. And what we're doing here, we're getting the body of the document. This get body document is going to allow us to traverse through each one of the elements, or basically just make our way through each one of the elements that are returned in the HTTP response based on the city and the state that we've passed in. Next, we're going to retrieve the root element. This is going to be the base element that we are going to be retrieving from the HTTP response. After we do that, we're going to traverse and make our way through the elements with these for loops here. So we're going to make our way through the element until we get to the element we want. Once we make it to the point in XML we're looking for, we're going to grab the lat and long, and then we're going to update the data members for lat and long, which I have up here, latitude and longitude. All right, now after we make our way down to this and we traverse through the elements and we find the lat and long within the HTTP response, we're basically just going to set those particular values. So we have the requested value equals child node dot get text. And then from there, we just want to return the requested value. All right, so what we need to do next, so this method is pretty much done now. And what we need to do next is basically just, okay, so basically what we've done here, we're returning back the requested value, or as this method states, we're basically just processing the latitude and longitude. We're passing back a requested value. Now, in order to set the lat and longs, we need to go into this method, get longitude and get latitude, which I created, and then we basically just need to add one line of code, which is going to be this: return Latin long, and then from here, longitude, and then we do the same thing for the other method. Latitude. And this is pretty much it. We don't need this return in this method, but this is pretty much it. So basically what's happening here is that whenever this method is called, longitude, whenever longitude is called, it is going to process the Latin long. So the longitude is going to be passed in to this particular method, which is the angular direction, and it's going to return whatever the requested value is. If you pass in the longitude, it's going to return you the requested value of longitude, which will be read from the HTTP response. And that goes the same for latitude. If latitude is passed in, we're going to retrieve the latitude from the HTTP response that we get back from Geocoding API. And that is pretty much it for the Apex page. Well, let's see. Let me zoom out real quick. Saying that unexpected token line 75. Alright guys, so I just made a couple of changes. There are some of the things that I missed as I was making my way through coding this for you. If it's not clear, I'm going to include a Google Drive link where you can actually copy and paste this Apex class in the description of this video just in case you get confused. But based on the error that we were getting earlier, just make sure that all this here is typed exactly as is. Up here, I believe I was missing a parentheses up here. Just make sure each one of these for loops are exactly as you see it here in this video. Another thing is that I noticed that here I only had a single equal sign. This should be double equal sign because we're basically trying to compare and see if the angular direction is equal to the string latitude. And I believe here I didn't spell requested value properly. I had to modify this, and once I did that, I was able to save and save properly. But as far as this goes, this is pretty much everything that is needed here. The only thing that you may have to worry about is this API key. Obviously, I'm going to add my API key, but I don't want to share it here in this video. So add your own API key here. But when I run this actual application, and in addition to the Visual Force page that I'm going to create for this, I'm definitely going to add my API key to show you that it works. So hopefully this portion of the video made sense to you guys, and hopefully you understand it. If you have any questions, go ahead and just leave them in the comments below. But just like I said, if you get a little bit confused with this particular assignment, I'm going to be posting a link in Google Drive which contains all of this stuff, so that you guys could have a better understanding of how everything works, and it's also going to be put there just to make sure that you don't miss anything. All right, so let's make our way to the Visual Force page now. We're going to start developing that. All right, so for the Visual Force page, what we're going to need to do, first of all, is just like the same thing that we do in other videos. We're actually just going to create a title for this page. We're also going to have a controller for this page. And as we know, the controller is going to be the exact name as our Salesforce Apex page that we just created. So now we want to go in and just start writing the code now. So we'll just zoom this in for you guys. And the first thing that we need to do is this. We need to, first of all, add a form element. So Apex colon form, and obviously we're gonna have to close this eventually. And inside of this form, we're going to need ourselves a section header. We then need to create ourselves a page block. Apex page block page block actually. Set this equal to input. And obviously we're going to want to be closing this page block as well. So let's just put this there in advance. Alright, so that's our page block. Now inside this page block we're going to need a page block section now. So Apex page block section. And just like before, we know we're going to be needing to close this. So we just need to create one right under here. So in this page block section, what we need now is a page block selection item. And these page block selection items are going to be the city and the state. We're also going to have the button that the user is going to use to submit. Section. So we need our page block section item. It's not selection, it's actually section. And we just want to copy this 2 more times because we're going to have one for the city, we're going to have one for the state, and then we're going to have one for the actual button, the submit button. All right, so inside of this element, this page block selection item, we need to type city and then a colon. And then right after that, we're going to need Apex input text value equals, and then exclamation point city. And then ID equals city text. All right, so hopefully you guys know what's going on here. We're going to have a page block item. So basically we have a page block section, and then inside of that section we're going to have a page block item. The item is going to be city. This is just basically going to be a label, and then we're going to have our input text, which is going to be where the user enters in the city. And that value is going to be passed as city into our Apex class, because as you've seen in our Apex class, we need to be able to retrieve the city from whatever the user passes in. They can enter in the city, We need to take that information, process it so that we can get the proper HTTP response as well as the longitude and the latitude once we put everything together. Because obviously we do need the city as well as the state in order to make sure that we get a proper response back. All right, so we're going to do the same thing for state. State, colon, and then we're going to do something like this. Well, I can just pretty much copy this and just make changes here. So, all right. So we're going to have this as state. All right, and this is for our state here. And then here we're going to have our button. We're going to go apex, colon, command, button, value equals submit. And this is basically just going to be the button that we use to submit. Pretty straightforward. And then after that, we have our closing tag of page block section. And then after that, page block. Now, this is what we need to do next. We need to create a section or a page block for the output. So the first thing that we need, apex, page block, title equals output. And then obviously we are going to need a closing tag element. Okay. Okay, what we're going to do next is now add our page block section. We're going to do something like this. Apex page block section. And this is going to be a closing tag down here as well. Page block section. And then after that, we need a page block section item. But in this page block section, first of all, we need to do this. Equals 1. It's going to be one column. Here. Now, the next thing that we need is the page block section item. So we're going to do this, apex page block section item. And we're going to need 3 of these. The reason we need 3 is because we're going to return an HTTP response as well as the longitude as well as the latitude. 1, 2, 3. Let me just line this up properly. All right. So the first one is going to be for the city. Inside of this page block, we need to do this. Type HTTP response and then we're going to go apex input text area. ID equals HTTP response body value equals HTTP response body and then style equals 300 px 300 px. This px, and I think that's pretty much it. All right. So what we need to do next is to go here, the Apex block section 2, and then what we're going to do, we're going to add the latitude and longitude now. Okay. Input text, and then we need the ID, which is going to be longitude, and then we need the value. Set this equal to longitude. And then basically we'll do the same thing. This is just going to be for latitude. Just going to separate this. I'm going to add some space. Latitude. All right, so we have HTTP response, we then have the longitude, and we then from there have the latitude. And I believe this is all we need. Now what we need to do now is to just save this for right now. Okay, so let's zoom this out for a minute. Salesforce HTTP response body. Read only property. Response body. I think we need a read only equals edit. All right, so basically we needed this read only equals true, and then we just save. Now if you just give me a minute, I'm going to show you this actually working with the preview, but I first have to go back to my Apex class and add that API key. All right, guys, so I've already added my API key, and I actually need to go back and show you guys something in my Apex class that needs to be modified. All right, guys, so I've already created, so I've already added my Geocoding API key in the Apex class already, and what you need to do is I might have missed something. You need to go back to your Apex class, and where you added this line, request.set endpoint, make sure that you have this and key, and then set it equal to your API key. What I showed you originally, that was not that was not the proper way to add it. You just need to add the and key and then set it equal to your API key, and you should be fine. Another thing is that in this visual force page, I forgot to add these line breaks. You need to make sure that you add these line breaks after this page block section for city and state. This will basically just make the visual force page look better. So if you preview, you're going to see this. You're going to see this. You can have the city and the state. So the line breaks that I added, this basically just makes sure that the city and the state line up with each other, and it looks nice like this. All right, so let's just start off and add a city, and then we're going to add a state. Once we do this, we're going to press the submit button. We press the submit button, it's going to retrieve the HTTP response. This is the entire XML HTTP response that you see here. And also, it's going to retrieve the longitude and latitude. Now, this longitude and latitude is what is retrieved here. So as you can see, just like I said, we start off at Geocode Response, and then we make our way down to this geometry, location, and then latitude and longitude. And this is pretty much it. That's how you would go about developing this particular application in Salesforce. So hopefully this makes sense to you guys. Just like I said, again, if this is a little bit confusing, this video, I'm going to include the entire code for the Apex class as well as the visual force page. The assignment, it was kind of intense, but I think we both made it through. All right, guys, so if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. And don't forget to like the video if you've learned something here. And also, don't forget to subscribe. And see you in the next one.